with the product folks. We have with us Arpit and Nate. Hey Arpit, hey Nate.
Hello, good evening.
Welcome to behavioral analytics. We have Nate and Arpit who will be, spending some time on, some parts of the deck. I won't reveal anything right now. I want that to be a surprise for you all. And we'll end it with Q&A. I'm sure lots and lots of questions will pop up during chat, so we'll keep some more time for that towards the end for sure. And without further ado, let's get started. So a little bit about the community. The product folks is a volunteer-driven community. We've been live for about 2 years now. Just about 2 years. We're going to hit our 2-year anniversary in a couple of weeks. But we've done about 150 plus events, all volunteer-driven, offline and online. We have a couple of initiatives running. One of them is called Learn PM with Me, a curated set of resources for people looking to upskill to product management. This is completely free. You could check that out. Another one is called Insurgio.club. We'll be shooting out an announcement really soon. I think we've got a lot of applications, and we do only one cohort a year, so do check that out. Apart from that, lots and lots of conferences, teardowns, initiatives for people who've already broken into product, networking sessions, everything live on thepmfolks.com. So do check that out. And with that part, I'll hand it over to you, Nate and Arpit. Welcome. See you on the other side.
Yeah, so just to introduce the speakers for today, we have Nate Franklin. He is the product marketing lead at Amplitude. Amplitude, if you know, it's a core product analytics solution for all things software, and it's a leading market solution provider in the right now. Nate has had like a core. He calls himself a product nerd at LinkedIn. You should definitely check that out. But yeah, he has had like a core experience at B2B, B2C, and all things product. Today is going to be talking largely about what's in the wires of behavioral data and behavioral decision making. And I've seen this slide, as Swas mentioned, it's one of the most interesting decks that I've had. So looking forward, Nate, hi and welcome.
Yeah. Awesome, thanks so much.
Yeah. Secondly, we have Arpit. Arpit is right now the VP of Analytics and Decision Science at Khatabook. Khatabook, as we know, is one of our favorite startups out there in the community as well. Arpit has had also a chance to work with Zoomcar earlier and has had extremely extensive career in all things data. So anything data related things are going to go to Arpit today. And yeah, today is mostly going to be talking about more about the industrial piece. What we have had a feedback in the past is that our community does not want to learn about the whys and what, but more about how it's getting applied in the industry and how they can take this learning and apply in their own company as well. So Arpit's content is mostly going to be around the industry specific use cases. And yeah, again, as I said, it's an interesting one. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great time at the content here. Just a quick thing, there is a question section on the right for you. You guys can just drop in your questions. For the last 15-20 minutes in this talk will be just for questions, where we'll pick up the top voted questions from your end and throw it at probably Nate or Arpit individually. Separately, help us prioritize those questions because unlikely we'll be able to take all the questions. So just upvote whichever questions makes the most sense to you. We'll definitely take those ones first. So yeah, without further ado, handing it to Nate first. And yeah, over to you, Nate.
Great, thank you so much. All right, well, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Great. So I'm Nate Franklin. I'm on the product marketing team here at Amplitude. I've been sort of PM in a past life, as sort of, as the introduction said, is probably set up a lot of different roles between B2B and B2C, but the past few years I've been working at Amplitude. And what I love about working at Amplitude is I get to work with product and product people all day long. So I do a lot of talks similar to this. I work with our product team really closely. This is just something I'm super passionate about and really, really excited to be here with all of you. I'm currently in San Francisco, so you see it is still the morning here. And you might get a visit from my 3-year-old daughter, but hopefully that won't necessarily happen. So great, let's get into it. Now, before I go to the next slide, I just want to open up to everyone is that we're gonna be talking about behavioral data today. What do you guys think behavioral data is? Like how is it different? Can you just post that in the chat? I give everyone just about a minute or so to just post what you think behavioral data is and why it's different. User actions. Good start. What else? Parth can't be the only one here that knows about behavioral data. Figuring out user patterns. Yep. Exactly. Awesome. All right. Yeah, you guys are right on the right track here, right? Understand the patterns, looking for what behaviors are happening. What does those behaviors mean? Yeah, you guys are, this is absolutely right. So what I like to say when I think about behavioral data is a great quote from Chamath. And what he says is people have this vision of like this crazy magical thing you're supposed to do with a product where you're supposed to like somehow trick people into these extra normal behaviors and get them to do something that they're not normally going to do. Whereas when you think about what the best companies really do, what they're most successful at is actually just understanding the basic part of what makes their product valuable and how users are actually engaging in their product. And that is what behavioral data is all about, is how do we get to that baseline understanding of what makes our product special and what our users are going to do inside of it, so then we can design the rest of our experience around that. And so when you think about companies that have really been successful at doing this, it's something that's called sort of product-led, right? And what we talk about a lot is how product-led companies are the ones that are really winning. Some of the big ones on the side, there's a lot more out there who are this product-led vision. And what they're able to do is they're able to, in many ways, defy the odds, right? Think how easy it is to create a product or an app today. You don't need to be technical. You don't even need to know code. You can basically build it through like a WYSIWYG editor, or just go online and use something like an online website and just turn that into a product for you with pretty much no cost and almost no resources. And so what that means is that there's this explosion of choice of what people can do, not just in the B2C space, but also in B2B. And so that means it becomes harder and harder and harder for any company to survive and be successful. And so what that means then is everything comes down to the experience that you deliver in your product, right? It's not just enough to have great marketing. It's not just enough to be first to an industry. What matters is, are you consistently delivering the best product experience? Because if you're not, someone else is going to come in there and take your users. And so that is the point of why we're talking about behavioral data, and that's what we're going to be going into further depth today. But that's what we need to all remember. And so the next question I have for all of you, as I alluded to this a little bit, but what do you think it means to be product-led? Let's post that in the chat. You guys are all product people, so I'm sure you got opinions on this. Product drives the business, yes. Product brings the users, what else? I've actually heard someone say that product is the business, right? That's another thing as well, is that it's not just digital isn't a strategy, digital is your business, right? Same thing here, product is the solution. Yes, obsession with your product, that's right. I think like the big thing that we talk about, at least at Amplitude, is putting the product in the forefront. The product isn't a channel, the product isn't the place that you're gonna work on the side. It is the core part of your business, and in the world today, it's actually your best competitive advantage. And there's no one that understands this better than Jeff Bezos. Other things about him aside, he's obviously got the product part really figured out. And this is actually a quote from, I guess, almost 4 years ago now, back in 2017. And while the quote is old, the meaning is still super relevant for the rest of us. And what I mean by that is what he's figured out years, maybe decades ago, is something that I think the rest of the world is really starting to get their hands around now. And that's the idea of using your behaviors and understand what's actually happening in your product to predict the future. What Jeff says here in this quote is he knows exactly what's going to happen over the next 3 years. He's not worried about the trajectory of Amazon 3 years between the years of 2017 and 2020. He understands the behavior of his users enough to know that if he hits the right metrics over the coming couple of years, he can basically predict what Amazon's performance will be. So he's thinking 3 years out. That is what it really truly means to be product-led, is that you completely understand the behaviors inside of your customers and inside your product so much that if you see a couple leading indicators of metrics, there's something called the North Star. We'll do that in a different section. But that metric is what allows you to predict the future of your product. And that is the thing that all of us should be trying to strive for. It's going to take a lot of work, but that is the goal. That is why behavioral data exists, and that's what we're trying to solve. And so another way to think about what's the difference between typical, what we call like web and mobile analytics data or page view data and behavioral data is just the difference between the what and the why. And so the what questions that you'll often get in sort of traditional analytics is, what sources drive the most traffic? What is our conversion rate? What step in the funnel has the biggest drop off? What is our retention rate? And what do users click on the most? These are all important questions and things we have to know. We don't want these questions to go away. The problem though is that these questions stop with the answer, right? So you will ask, okay, which sources drive the most traffic? And then the question is, so what? Why is that source driving more traffic? Should it be the most successful source? Is there something else that's happening in other sources that aren't driving more traffic? The reason why behavioral data is so important is it helps us take the next step and actually try to craft and control the environments that we're working in, right? So then instead of just asking one question and getting the answer and then telling your executive, okay, so we get the most from social and paid and we're not getting very much off of whatever, and that's just the answer, right? That doesn't help you change your business, that doesn't help you grow. What helps you grow is the type of question on the right, where you start with one question and that leads you to 5, 10, maybe 15 different questions in succession. And that sort of investigation or that exploration is where you figure out what the value is in your product, what users are doing, and what you can do to optimize that. Because that is the goal of all this, right? The reason why we spend all this time thinking about behavioral data is about understanding what users are doing so that we can say, okay, this is a behavior that is productive in my app. This is a behavior that is not productive. And therefore I should change it or I should alter it. Or if I need to make sure they don't do that because it's actually hurting their experience. And so for those of you who haven't seen behavioral data before or wondering like, well, what does behavioral data actually look like? This is sort of a good kind of technical explanation of what it is. There are essentially 4 parts. And those parts are events, event properties, users, and user properties. And so events is essentially the action. So this would be similar to like potentially a page view today or a click of something that the user is doing. It can also actually count for server-side action. So maybe sending a push notification even if it doesn't get opened. Or other things like that where it's not necessarily directly created by a user, but it's related to an action that occurred either from the product or from the user. The event property is then the part that adds context on that. Is that what is that action about? Is that if it's about playing a song, what type of song was it? What was the name of the song? What is the genre? Have they played songs before, right? It's sort of that context on top of the action. And then the bottom part is sort of the users, which is who is doing this and what do we know about that person? And so the way you measure behavior is actually all 4 of these things coming together. And the reason why it's super different is you actually have the context on top of it. That's those event properties, that's the action, and it's also the actions that are not necessarily tabulated by someone making a click. And so when you think about how this would manifest itself in a tool like Amplitude, this is literally how you create your analysis, right? Is that you're using events and event properties and user properties to control what you're seeing. And I'm going to go on a quick demo a little bit later to show you what it looks like. But this is essentially the crux of all behavioral data. And when you put these things side by side, or you can put behavioral data back to back to back to back, that's how you can start to find those patterns. And so this is like a fundamental difference that is, I think almost all analytics tools today are starting to actually shift to this type of data infrastructure. Cool. So what I want to talk about now is a product called Calm. You may have heard of it. It's at this point a really successful meditation wellness app. They were actually a very early customer with Amplitude a while ago, and I want to give you a story about something that happened a few years ago. So this is not something that happened right now. And what this story is when Calm was in their early days, they were doing a really great job of getting users in there. They were figuring out their funnel and acquiring users. But what they realized at some point was that there was just sort of they had the leaky bucket problem, which I think a lot of us have at some point, and probably maybe often in our careers as product people, in that they were bringing a lot of people in the front door, but a lot more, it felt like, were actually falling off and weren't retaining. And so you can imagine a retention curve like this where it was pretty low. So maybe even as low as 10% or even lower than that was what the retention. And so for them, that's obviously a huge problem. And that's the first thing you should solve for. And I think any growth expert or thought leader in this will tell you, don't spend more money on acquisition until you've solved your retention problem, because you're literally just throwing money in the trash can. And so what Calm was able to do was actually start to understand, okay, why is this happening? How can I figure this out? And one of the beautiful parts of behavioral data is it actually allows you to see this in more than just a static view like this today. And so what you see here is, this would be something you might see in any analytics tool, is just like, okay, our retention curve. And you can see that if you want to cohort this by the weeks they started, it might look a little bit similar, it might look a little different. But the bottom line is just looking at when someone starts in your app isn't going to get you the insights of what's really making someone more likely to retain versus less likely. And so what behavioral data can actually allow you to do is essentially cohort or segment this population by different behaviors. And so by doing that, Calm was able to discover this different group. And if you look here, this different group was 3 times more likely to retain, right? And so in this instance, what they were able to find by doing segmentation analysis by different behaviors is identify a group that was far more likely to retain and start to do some analysis on them, right? So who are these users? What do we know about them? And so when they actually looked at like, well, how does this compare to our weekly active users? It was basically less than 1%. And so this one group of users who was retained 3 times as much as the rest of their user base was less than 1% of the users. And so they must have been doing something super special or super crazy because it was really making a huge difference on their product metrics, right? And so this is how Calm was able to start to think about, what do we need to go do and learn to get more people to be like this group? How can we make this less than 1% part of our segment become 80% or more? And so before I go to the next slide, does anyone have an idea of what it might have been that this group of users were doing that made them so sticky compared to other people? Let's put that in the chat. What do we think could have been possibly happening with this group of users that would have made them more likely to retain? And again, Calm's a meditation app. Yeah, they're signed up. Well, everyone was signed up. They're using a particular time of day or meditation reminder. The app was useful for them. We got to be a little more specific than that. They took a few actions in the first week, integrations. Yeah, you guys are totally on the right frame here. So someone did actually get it, and the answer was, and I'll get to that in a second. There was a little feature tucked away in the home screen under settings. And then under one more place, under reminders, and there's this thing called the mindfulness reminder. And so 3 to 4 clicks off the home screen where you had to go find it was the daily reminder to do your meditation or your mindfulness moment, right? And the people who actually found this, the people who explored the app enough and actually created that, well, they were the ones sticking around. And so what do you do when you learn about this is you change your flow for the rest of the users. So what Calm was able to do, again, this was a few years ago, is move the mindfulness reminder to be part of the onboarding experience. And guess what happened when you do that? Massive impacts on the retention, okay? And so that is the beauty of behavioral data, is actually understanding that by identifying those problems and figure out who those power users are and figuring out what they do, is that using that to then change the experience for everyone else to get them to exhibit those similar behaviors and have that massive result for your business. So this is an amazing example from Calm. And if you talk to people who use behavioral data, this is the type of thing you discover. It's not always going to be to the extent of this massive change of uncovering this key insight that is 3x your retention. But the reality is it's the day-to-day understanding of your behavior and learning about what's going on in your product that allows you to achieve results like this. And I think it's like one of those things where, and by the way, now Calm, that year they won the app of the year, and now they just had a huge valuation in 2020, so they're extremely successful. But the reality of what behavioral data is supporting is this understanding that you need to constantly do maintenance on your app, right? Just like your own home. Think about your house. If you have a house, it's constantly needing repair. You're going to have to replace appliances. You need to paint the walls. You're going to add new furniture. It's never a place that just sits there and never changes over the course of years. Each year, each month that goes by, you make changes, you add new things, you get rid of new things or get rid of things. That is the same thing with your product, right? And so you can't just assume you're going to be able to be stable. And once you create a good experience, walk away and assume it's going to be there for the rest of all time. No, you're constantly tuning it, understand what's going on as users' needs change. That is what the power of behavioral data does. And that is exactly why Calm has been so successful. So what I like to talk about is like, right? Did you guys lose my screen?
Nate, yes, you might have to just share that again.
Yeah, let me do it again.
Slide connection problem at Nate's end. Just waiting for him to join back. Guys, meanwhile, you can help us prioritize the questions and upvote the questions which you feel must be answered by either Nate or Arpit. Okay, Nate is back.
Cool. Sorry about that, folks. So I think this is where I left off, but the key here is that behavioral data is what we like to say is it's what gets you to the core value creation, right? And so when you think about
Nate, Yeah, Neat, I think we lost you for the last 1 or 2 minutes. I think some bad connection. If you
Okay,
can
let me go
just
back to
maybe,
slide then.
yeah, this you were on this slide, so maybe just start with this slide.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the point of what I was trying to say here is, when I talked about the example earlier around the analogy of a house, right, where you're constantly updating it, it needs maintenance, it requires you to add new furniture and update your appliances, whatever. That's the same thing with your product. And the only way to know what's super valuable and what you should focus on is what behavioral data does. And that's someone from product says this, someone from marketing says that, and you never really get to the core of what's actually valuable for users. And that is why this idea of value creation, understanding that, is so important. Okay, so let's go to the next one here. So one of the things that I talk about with this is just like trying to understand the different steps along your journey. And these are just some examples of how potential companies could ask these questions. But when you think about the process from going from a new user to the point of when they are essentially exchanging value with you, there are, especially today, hundreds of steps that need to occur. And so what your behavioral data is doing is actually understanding each of those steps along the way and helping you find those patterns. So why are users retaining higher on mobile than on the web? If you're PayPal, or what are the navigational flows that affect trial conversion? Why do some users increase their thing over time? These are the type of things that behavioral data can tell us that no other data can. And that's because it helps us understand what are the difference between those users and what are the different cohorts that actually drive them. And these are actually some examples of customers using behavioral data. And so when I think about what you should do when you sort of start with your behavioral data, like if someone's like, okay, I just got a behavioral data platform, I'm starting to use it, like what are the first things I need to do? I think there are 4 things that you should do out of the gate that are really important. Besides like just getting a baseline understanding of what your product looks like and user behavior, the first thing is you need to understand your critical event. And if you don't know this terminology, the critical event is the moment at which users are aligned, like essentially become aligned to value, right? So for Amplitude, that's probably when they create their first chart. Or for Spotify, maybe it's when they follow their first playlist. Or for any of the product, you can sort of imagine is what is that point when you need to get them to, where that is where you've sort of got them hooked. That's where they really understand the value of your product. The second part is around understanding your power users. This is kind of the example what happened with Calm, where if you can figure out what are the users who are more likely to retain, more likely to spend money with you, more likely to engage, what are they doing that everyone else is not doing? Learn from your power users, right? And then from there, you can then, once you figure out who your power users are, then you start to understand what their journey is. And when you can visualize the journey of the power users, is you can actually see what makes them special, what makes them different, what are they doing? And that allows you to map out how people are going to interact in your product. Because not everyone's going to be a power user. There's going to be some people who are going to be the lower edge, but you still need to understand what the right journey is for them. And finally, possibly the most important, is to understand what actually drives impact. Because even if you understand all the things on the left, if you can't figure out anything that can consistently move your metrics, then that's a really big problem. And so trying to understand is, did the last feature I shipped make a difference? What behaviors are driving other behaviors? Understand the relationship between behaviors inside your product is probably the most important thing you can do, but just takes a little bit of time to get there. So you think about this is sort of like the 3 or 4 things I would do right out of the gate and make sure you understand that. And so what I want to do now is actually show you how you can do this in Amplitude so you can be really clear what I mean by each of these. And so before I just hop into Amplitude, Amplitude is a product analytics company. What we offer is a behavioral analytics solution that allows you to track the behaviors in your product and visualize it really easily so you can cohort it, understand what users are doing, use that to personalize your experience, and that all sort of happens inside. So let's take a look at one of these charts. So this chart is called Kpis. And so what Kpis does is Kpis actually allows us to essentially find a critical event really fast. And what it does is it looks at is for users who are in a cohort, I chose new users and are going to perform any event, which of those events are likely to predict that they'll be around for the second week? And so what we see here is that we get a list of events that are essentially user actions. Remember, we talked about what an event is earlier. that are correlated with someone likely to retain. So purchasing a song or video, that makes sense. That's probably too far down the line for us to be a critical event. But maybe something like this, sharing song or video. So that's really interesting. What I can see here is that it's moderately predictive at 7 days. And so what I can learn is that maybe my critical event is sharing song or video. And so with just a couple clicks, you're able to understand what those critical events look like. And that allows me to orient more of my analysis around it. The second thing I talked about is understanding power users. And this chart is called stickiness. There's another word for it, which is called non-cumulative. And essentially what it is that other people call it like the smile curve. And what that means is you want to understand like sort of where the differences are in your types of users. And so this is people who use this app once a day, people who use the app 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, right? And so the smile is what most healthy products have, is you have a lot of people on the low end and then a strong group of people on the high end, right? And guess who those people on the high end are? Those are your power users, right? And so you can learn from these people, the people who are using your product 5 to 6 days a week, of what are they doing that's special? What are they doing that's different? And with a tool like Amplitude, you can click into it, create a cohort, and save them, so you can then use that for analysis in other tools. But this is super powerful for you to understand the differences between people who are using it 1 day versus people who are using it for 5 to 6 days. And then the other part here is just around funnels. And so I think everyone has seen a funnel before, so I'm not going to wow you with a funnel. But what's important about this, and where I think other types of data falls flat, is it shows you the funnel, but it doesn't show you what to do, right? So we see sign up, search, play, and then drop off when we want them to get a ticket here, and that's massive drop off. Not all that surprising, but any good product person is going to ask, well, what can I do to fix it? What can I do to solve it? Why are people dropping off? And so that's why it's really important to be able to go into a part of your funnel and actually understand what is the journey that's happening between these 2 points. So this is a tool we call Journeys, where you scroll in here and you actually see every single step inside of your funnel, and especially inside of those two paths, and see what users are doing. So if someone just goes to concept landing screen and they purchase right away, well, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. That's a big chunk of our users. But there's still a 10% that have a much longer path, right? Where after playing, they favorite, they share it, they search it. We can even scroll to the right here and see what else they're doing afterwards. And so we can get a really good sense of what the experience is actually like for users and how many of them are actually doing it. More importantly, the other side is, which is where we often want to focus our attention, is what is getting people not to convert, right? And so that's the idea of visualizing your journeys, is that you need to understand what you can actually do to see the different parts of your product, of why someone is going through one section and not converting versus others. And here we can sort of quickly learn that viewing ads is probably hurting our experience. And maybe that's the way we have to monetize, so we'll have to balance that, but it is clearly having a negative impact on someone's likelihood to purchase a ticket. And so that's something that we can learn and take back to our team and figure out what we could do to adjust that experience. The final part I want to talk about is just around impact. So this is an analysis that allows you to understand the impact of one behavior on another. So in this case, we're looking at what is the impact of performing play, song, or video for the first time on purchasing ticket. And so if you scroll down to this chart, there we go. What you see is that before someone has played a song or video, because this line in the middle is the play, song, or video, the frequency with which they purchase tickets is basically 0. But then once they play their first song or video, that frequency goes up to around 1.3 to 1.4. And so what you can tell is that the action of playing a song or video, which makes sense, has a direct impact on someone's likelihood, or the frequency with which that they purchase a ticket. And so now I can start to learn how that behavior has other effects. Now you can do this with all sorts of behaviors in your product and see the relationship, but that is the idea of understanding the impact. How does one behavior affect another, and how can I use that to drive the right behaviors that I want in my product? So that's just a little bit overview of Amplitude. And sort of as I start to close out my talk here, let me shift this back. But I think what's important for everyone to remember is the reason why we talk about behavioral data is it's about going beyond the surface level analysis, right? You might have heard it called vanity metrics or things like that. The goal here is how do we go beyond things just like page views and even like daily active users. Daily active users isn't a super helpful statistic. It just tells you how many people are in your product clicking things. Are those people useful? Are they creating value? Are they happy? You have no idea. And so what you need is to be able to go below all that and understand, what does engagement look like? How is that journey going across devices? What is driving repeat purchases? what's driving retention, how do we actually ultimately get to LTV? And that is the value of behavioral data, and that is why you need to be able to spend time to understand it and actually use it. And so that's something that at Amplitude we specialize in, talk a lot about. If you guys have seen me talking other places, this is all I talk about. So super excited. But with that, that is the end. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take questions at the end. With this, I'll pass it over to Arpit.
Thanks so much, Nate. I think that was an awesome primer. I'm sure while Arpit is coming down to all the examples that he has, there are a bunch of questions that you can already start seeing in the chat section and the question section. In case you want to take some of them, you can answer them in the chat. But I think now is where everyone's gearing up to the, how do we really apply everything that you shared? And looking forward to this, Arpit. Over to you.
Thank you, Suhas. Thank you, Path, and great talk, Nate. I'll just carry on your thought forward into industry applications. Guys, before I start, I want to hear from you. I understand that a lot of you are from product and data. So what are the applications you have seen in your companies or around you of behavior analytics? After identifying how people are behaving inside your product, what are the business actions majorly that are taken, or how does it help? Great example. Right. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. You can keep mentioning in the live chat. What do you think about it? I'll start with it and take you through the key use cases that are there in the industry right now. So the five most common applications of behavioral analytics are, first of all, improving the conversion funnel. I think Nate also talked about it, how we can track user are flowing from one step to another. So ultimately, what you want to do is improve the rate of people purchasing our product or subscribing to our product, or just having a good experience with our product. Second, the most common behavioral analytics use case is product personalization. I think it's almost everyone would know about it. The third is predicting what the users will do next. Okay. Also, whether they will come back and use my product again or not. The fourth one is understanding where the person is dropping off or why they are uninstalling our app or stop using our product. And also the fifth one is that what all leads to usage of a product feature. So within a product, we might be having multiple features, which would be of value. And we want to understand that when people use it, what all actions do they perform before they use it, so that you can scale that feature. So these are the five main applications in the industry. And what I'll do today is I'll be talking about two of them in depth, because I would say that around 70% is covered in the first two, and the rest 30% is in the point 3, 4, and 5. So I'll start with the first one, improving the conversion funnel. Okay. So before jumping into examples, I will also try to explain you the basics behind it, how it is done, and to yield good results, kind of standard approaches and frameworks. So there's a 4-step conversion funnel. The first is obviously driving traffic or spreading awareness about your product. The second is when the customer comes inside your app or visits your store. The second step is exploration of whatever you have to sell or show to them. The third step is user driven. It is called evaluation, when they kind of evaluate what you have and whether they like it or not. And the fourth step is payment or purchase. So, and this is obviously the most critical step. This is also the ROI step, what we call in the conversion funnel. Now, look back at your products, what each of you have or your companies have, and try to divide your product into these 4 buckets. Now you can divide the user actions also in these 4 buckets. Like say someone was asking, we have so many events and we have analysis paralysis, right? So these are some of the ways to not go paralyzed by these things, is to classify your events into these 4 buckets. Is it exploration event? Is it an evaluation event? Is it a purchase or payment event? Or is it the initial awareness event? Now, once we have done that, we'll go one by one, right? And I'll explain you that what are some of the trade secrets in the market, how people are improving it, and what matters. The first one is driving the traffic. Now, what I've done is I've taken an example of a duty-free store you would have seen in the I think in any of the airports. Now, when you come inside the duty-free airport, there are two kind of people. Either it can be need based or it can be impulse based. Need based are obviously that, say for example, you are going back to your home and you need to take chocolates and you have decided that I'll take from a duty free store. Impulse based is that you had no intention, but once you see it, you feel good about it and you also feel the urge to take it. So when you would analyze the type of traffic that is coming to your websites or app or stores, you will, it's important to make a distinction how much is need based and how much is impulse based. And impulse based is actually the most underrated one, but you would be happily surprised to know that majority of, not the majority, but a significant amount of your traffic would be impulse based. Now, why it is good is, and how do you do it is, for example, imagine a product or say a retail store. If it looks very attractive, and if it is the products that are arranged in the store are very relevant to the kind of target audience around that area, then your impulse based behavior increases. Right. So what are some of the learnings that we have from the first step is, do not try to show the things that are unrelated to your TG. Now let's take this example back to other things. For example, let's take example of some super app. Now say Paytm is a super app. Now if someone comes to the app and you have hundreds of things around, and I only use the app for a very particular use case, say that is just recharging my mobile phone. And if there are so many use cases that the main use case that I'm coming there from is hidden, so there are higher chances that I'll drop off from the funnel, right? Or I will bounce off from the app. So that is where the relevance comes, and that is where the target group comes. So the product should be able to identify each and every consumer, what is important for them, and show them that particular thing. So this is what I mean by driving the traffic. Let's go to the next one. Now, next one is called exploring. So now say you are at a duty-free shop and you get inside, right? And you see various products. Now comes the place where you start to explore what all varieties are present. What all things can I buy? What is the amount of variety that I have? Now, again, obviously, when you kind of explore things, you will find few things that you came for, that is comes into the need, and there would be few things that you did not come for, but you could associate that things, or there was a latent demand that got generated after seeing the product, right? Again, it is important to classify within your products that what was the actual need and what is getting cross-sold. So whatever comes under impulse will get actually cross-sold. The tip here is that more variety at this stage increases the chances of purchase, and also it helps in cross-selling. Now from here, this slide onwards, I'll start talking about the KPIs that as a product manager or as a data analyst you should measure in each of these steps. So here, if you see the KPI section, it's important for us to measure the percentage of different user types that are coming onto your app. By demographics, by age, or by different, say, salary, income groups, or any cut that you have or information you have about the users, so that you know that for a particular type of user, what are the things they are exploring and what are the things they're buying. We should also know the percentage of users who are exploring the product varieties. Now, many a time it will happen that people come onto your apps or to your stores, but they do not really explore things. They just come, maybe just browse to the home screen and go. They do not really go inside the products and see the varieties. So we need to have a understanding of that percentage. If this percentage is low, obviously there's something wrong, that the USP of the product is not coming through as people are entering. If this is high, then you're in a good state. We should also measure the average variety presented when people start browsing. So it is obviously seen that if the variety for the particular selection of things that they're doing is less, the chances of them purchasing is also less. And the reason for that is there's a human side behind it, that people, if they do not see variety, they think that the decision that they will make will not be optimal decision. So these are all behavioral data analytics that all these insights came out from. Now, the techniques that we can use in this is something like demographic clustering to understand which type of people are coming to our funnels. We can understand user flow funnels, which Nate talked about. And we can obviously see the funnel step conversions using any of the tools. Yes, okay, now we have understood exploring. Let's move on to the next step. Next step is evaluation. So say you are in a store and you go to a particular section and say you want cosmetics, all right? So you pick up 2 bottles and then you start analyzing that, okay, for my hair, which product would be better? And you start comparing the ingredients and you start comparing the prices, the brands, and all the other things. So this is the most critical step where all the products play upon. So if the person has come to this step, it shows that the person is already very high intent. Okay, and this is where people play around a lot. I'll cover some of the examples in a couple of slides. So a couple of tips here. Whatever has more visibility has higher chances of purchases. So I like to share some examples with you from very parallel world. For example, from a restaurant. So when you go to a restaurant, you will see that the dishes are never ordered, right, in a like ascending order or descending order. Whereas we go to any other product, say for example, we go to and browse Amazon or Flipkart or any other similar website, you'll always see that they're sorted by something. But here they're not sorted. What they try to do is they will try to put a high proportion of high priced products in the top section of the menu, and then a more proportion of low price product in the lower section. And why it happens is because we read top to down, and we generally do not read everything, and the chances of us purchasing what we see are more, so they increase the visibility of higher ticket items. Another thing that shopkeepers do inside the retail stores is that whatever shelf is at eye level, that is where they keep the products which have the highest margin. Products which have lowest margin, they would keep either lower or higher. That is how they optimize their ROI. So these are all taken out by behavioral data. The KPIs that you could see here are the previous purchase history of the returning customers. So for example, I already know that this customer is the purchase increases. Another important KPI at this stage is browse to conversion ratio. Say out of all the people who are converting, coming to evaluation phase, how many are actually purchasing the product? If that goes down on a day level or for a particular product which is being browsed, that is kind of an indication that that product is not really liked, or when it is being compared, it is not, it does not win over the other product. Also, what is important to know is that as you change the discount you give at the evaluation phase, how do the customers react? Now, this is basically a pricing strategy that a lot of people use in the businesses to increase the ROI. And you would generally see like again example from a different sector. For example, you say Uber and Ola. If you would use that, whenever it rains, the price go up because they know that demand goes high and other modes of transport are not able to service well, right? So that is how they play around with discounts and prices. The techniques that you can use here are behavioral clustering. Now, at this stage, you would have good enough data for the customers, how they're browsed till this step, and you can, based on their behavior, you can cluster them, whether they are high intent, they are low intent, whether they are loyal users, return customers, whether they're first-time customers, and then see how is each of these cohorts behaving in the evaluation phase. A lot of companies do massive amount of A/B testing at this stage, just to know that how to make the evaluation succeed. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. The fourth stage is called payments. Now, at this stage, the final thing happens, right? So when you have to pay, you will need to see different options, whether you have to pay through credit card, debit card, net banking. And a very, I would say this option came only 5 to 6 years back, is cash on delivery. We really did not have digital payments before that, but when it came, we realized that people will not really do prepaid payments. They would prefer cash on delivery. There's a classic example of this from Flipkart. So when Flipkart started, it did not start with cash on delivery. And very soon they realized that, that whatever orders they were targeting, and they were not even close to that. And then it just, when they did the user study, behavioral study, it came out that people chose a product, they like it, but they're not confident whether this Flipkart would deliver it because it was a new business and they could not trust. To bring that trust factor, they brought in cash on delivery. And since then, cash on delivery is kind of a commonplace. Okay, so at this option, there are multiple things and KPIs which are very important to note. One is the number of payment options you have. Obviously, more payment options, more flexibility, and more conversion rates. Then click rate on different options. For example, if most of the customers are clicking on credit card, it tells you about your customer base and target base, that most of them would have credit card. So based on where your customers are clicking, you will have a decent idea what kind of customers you have. Then conversion for different options. How many people are clicking on, say, cash on delivery and converting, and net banking and converting. This kind of tells you, which mode would they prefer. And last is a very underrated but a very important, payment failure rates. It is very commonplace. Even the best apps have it, once in every 2-3 months. So it's very important to track that. Yeah, so in the notes, I've just mentioned that COD and EMI payments have also started. For example, companies like LazyPay are doing it, and many other companies, even Amazon has started the EMI, Paytm has started postpaid. So they know that these are options are generally used to target the lower income groups, or people who are do not trust your app so much. Now I'll take a very good example from booking.com, right? I am certain that a lot of you would have used it, if not all, but it's a booking website where you can book hotels and vacation homes to go to any city. And now this page comes after you select from which date to which date you want to go, and you select a hotel. These are the room types that is shown on booking.com. Now see how people are playing around here. I'll show you one by one. So let's go to the left side. You can see this red circle here. Now it says that someone just booked this. It's in high demand and only 3 rooms left on our site. Now, what are they doing here? What they're doing is they're creating something called as FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. If I do not book now, a person just booked before me, there's just 3 rooms left. It means there's high demand and I might lose this offer, right? So this is a technique that they have discovered after A/B experimenting and analyzing user behavior, that this works out a lot. Now you see another one. See how it is packed. On the left side, you have FOMO. On the right side, you see that 33 people are looking now. And according to the booking.com travel scientists, right? Again, it's a fear of missing out being created on this page. There's another, you can see here, last chance, only 1 room left on our site. Now, what do you see here, right? Now there are 3 prices listed here, $158, $145, and $182. As a business, which one would I want to sell the most? The last one, a triple room, right? That's the most expensive one. So you have highest margins there mostly. And there where they put extra FOMO element, that this is the last one we have. Okay. So people also, this is also used to create perceived perceptions that because the supply is less, it is more important or better. So a lot of people work around that. Next, we will go to understand this part where we have written like private bathroom, flat TV, soundproofing. Now, what booking.com had done was they figured out that if they would show only, say, double room and the price, people were going back a lot of times to see, okay, the room that I'm booking, does it have a private bathroom? Does it have a shower? What is the size of the room? And so on and so forth. So there was a correlation. If the people go back, then the propensity to drop out increases. Now, to reduce that, what they've done is they have put the most important information upfront in this page only, even if it makes it a little cluttered, but during the A/B testing, the percentage conversions increases. So that again is based out of behavioral data. So this is basically clarity to avoid going back. Now, if you see here, these techniques are called Strikeoff Pricing, where they have struck off 189, 175, and 158. What it makes you feel? It makes you feel that you're getting a great deal. Something that was $190, you're getting it $460. Okay. So again, this is a very common practice everywhere. Then you would see in the middle, it's written jackpot. This is the cheapest price you will ever see in London for your dates. Now, what are they doing? They are, even though they're showing you the price, but they are playing around with your psyche, and they're just trying to tell you this is the best offer you can get. If you just drop out right now, you won't get it again. There's the last one left, and so on and so forth. So all these are applications of behavioral data, and how what helps in conversion. Okay, so 3 notes here: creating FOMO, creating clarity, right? They don't have to go back, and creating flexibility. Flexibility means that I have multiple options within the double row. So if person wants one combination over the other, they can have like more refined choices. Moving on, the second case of the behavior analytics is product personalization. And this is a very good use case, used very widely, where the customer buying behavior or interaction behavior is studied and the products are personalized and made more relevant. What are the common, say, ROIs or the goals of personalization? Increasing conversion, of course. Now, reducing bounce rates. As I talked to you about it, that if I already know about a customer and I I can simplify my app to just suit their use case and not show them everything. This reduces the bounce rate. Improving ROI for a specific marketing tactic. If I show a particular marketing tactic to only relevant set of users, again, my ROI is higher. Facilitating product discovery. I think Nate talked about it in the product calm, how you put on like take reminders on the front page, help them discover it faster, right? And obviously increase the DAUs. Increasing order average value, and so all these things are related around retention, the lower ones, increasing retention, increasing drive purchases. So it is proven in the industry that if you are relevant to your users, there will be a significant lift in your repeat purchases. Okay, before we move on to the examples, I'll kind of take you through the basics of personalization. Now, what happens at the back end? The companies, they go and understand a user from a 360-degree perspective. They would analyze your in-app behavior. They would see which features you are using most commonly, and then tag your favorite features. They would try to understand where you're coming from, and your type of people generally like what type of things. They would also note down the other apps that you're using on the phone, so that say for example, you have more entertainment apps as compared to business apps. They know that you're inclined toward entertainment, so that information they can use in some way or the other. They also try to understand how much time you're spending on different apps, different products, different features. Again, this kind of helps them identify what is more relevant to them. And they also see your purchase history. Obviously this is present with them, and also in some cases your search history. The Google does it. Now, what they do after this is they kind of tie everything together and try to understand the user, that what the user likes. Generally, what they would do is they would do user cohorting or user clustering, what we say, and then analyze this kind of cluster likes what kind of things. So that is how personalization happens. So either it can happen at a cluster level, cluster is a group of people, or it can happen at a individual level. That's more advanced way of cluster personalization. Okay, let's understand who has mastered the personalization. Google has, right? And this is just very small example. Every other app you use for Google is extremely personalized. Now, what I've done here is I have just written Kafka in the Google search stream, and you would see that these are the results that came. Now, there's a result here at the bottom that says Frank Kafka. So actually, I was not looking for Kafka software. I was looking for Frank Kafka. So what I did is I clicked on the results that are related to Frank Kafka to show my intent. What happens is now I search Kafka again after clicking there. And this happened like after just a couple of minutes, I did the first browse. Now, if you see in the right panel, this is called the knowledge graph panel. Here, the search result has changed, and they have prioritized Frank Kafka for me. Now, this happened within seconds. Okay, where in the first search and second search, you can also try it out at your end. And this is what personalization means. Now, what has happened is that my number of results of Frank Kafka or related to them or articles related to him would increase, and my chances of going deeper and spending more time on Google will improve. So this is how Google uses personalization. Another great app for personalization is Spotify. So they kind of personalize as much as possible. They have two features. One is called Discover Weekly and one is called Daily Mixes. So what they do is, say you have listened to 10 or 15 songs, and they will try to understand using those songs that people who listen to these type of songs, what other songs they listen to. And the next week you come, they will make a playlist that comprises of the previous songs you have listened to the most, plus they will introduce some new freshness into the songs. So what will happen is that you do not need to search songs by yourself. They're just making a playlist for you. And most of the times people just keep listening to this playlist again and again and no need to search. And this is how they increase the engagement. Next example, I think this is the most famous one, is of Netflix. Okay. Now, what Netflix does is obviously it understands the content you're watching, and we for every content there's a genre, there's the actor who has worked in it, there's a time when that is launched, there's a language in which that series is or film is presented, and there are 100 other tags related to each and every content that you watch. Using that, they try to understand what is more relevant to you and present you the same thing. Again, Netflix has three things. They have three sections called Because You Watched. They have Watch It Again, and they have Continue Watching. So Because You Watch is something that is completely personalized. Because you watch, say, Orange is Black or some similar series, they would say people who have watched this have also watched this. There are concepts of things like called collaborative filtering in data science, and there are other techniques in RNN models that I use to predict what you will watch the next time. Watch It Again is obviously they have seen that the content sometimes that is watched once, people repeat it again, and they would populate this list with that. And Continue Watching is whatever you have left, they would continue with there. Next, another great example is Amazon. Now, if you see on the right-hand side, you will see people have written inspired by they have written inspired by shopping trends. Now, this is a personalized space depending on what you have bought, what you have explored and evaluated, where you have spent time the most, on which section, which page. So they have identified that I'm spending a lot of time in like type in bags, and similar related products, and they would just curate a shopping list for me with the most bought products in that category and show it to me the time I come at the homepage itself. Another example is Instagram. So obviously Instagram also tries hard, and Instagram and Facebook both do it. And they understand what content you watch. For example, you browse a lot of things. There are only few of them on which you click. There are a few of them on which you click but do not watch. And there are some who you watch till the end. Basis on that, they understand your behavior. They understand what you like. For example, you are clicking on all the dance videos and you are watching through of a particular artist, you like that artist a lot, and they would curate your experience basis that. They have introduced a feature called Explore tab, which kind of suggests photos and videos which you may like basis on a previous engagement. Next one is Facebook. This most used product started out 2003 and used till now. So they have their Explore feed again. They have also introduced short videos and many other small product features. Again, it is a personalized news feed related to what kind of things you watch, click on, and engage with. Right. So, guys, these are all the examples we have on personalization. And thank you for hearing us through. I'll end with this summary that behavior analytics, which was initially like only few people who used to do it, is no more an option. It is actually a necessity that is needed to meet customer expectation. I would say behavior analytics and this application have now become hygiene, right? So we all need to do it. And if you're not doing it, let's do it as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Arpit. This was quite an insightful conversation. Yeah, for both you and Arpit and Nate, we'll move to the question section. Guys, if you didn't have a chance to sort of prioritize or upvote questions for us, this might still be a good time. We'll only be able to take a few questions, so help us doing that. Right. So I'll take the first few questions. So again, I think a very common question everyone keeps hearing, but I'll probably direct this to Nate. How to avoid falling in the trap of analysis paralysis, given we can track so many events and properties? And this is asked by Somen Das. Yeah.
Great question. Yeah, I think actually one of the mistakes is assuming that you need to track everything when you first get started. And what I mean by that is just like instrument every place in your product out of the gate, because then you can fall in that trap. I think the best place that we actually recommend and what we do with our customers is say, let's figure out what you think is a critical flow in your product. Let's start there. You're a product person, you have a pretty good hypothesis, your intuition's pretty good, and let's make sure we instrument that one really well. And so once we work on that, and when we look at it, we do the analysis on it, and then when we feel good about it, then we go to the next thing. And like so yes, like it over time you will build up more and more, but it starts with you prioritizing of like, where is the most important part of my product that I want to focus on? Let's make sure that's really well instrumented, then I can move to the next thing. That's why sometimes when you see other like those tools out there like try to track everything, you're going to fall in that trap because it's just overwhelming. It's much more important to be focused and figure out what you want to solve.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. Not tracking everything is the larger problem that we have, I guess.
More data is not necessarily better. That's a common misconception. More data can actually make it more difficult.
Thanks, Nate. And Arpit, I think lots and lots of great examples in your deck as well. So thanks for that, getting a lot of good feedback. I just requested people in the chat section to help us upvote some questions because we got tons of questions. We actually had a couple of questions ourselves before the session that we had noted down. But given the paucity of time, I think we're going to jump straight. And I think Parth has picked the most upvoted one. I'll probably go for the second one. And I think this one, Arpit, you can take this one up. It goes on the lines of, it's a similar question, maybe you can take off from where Nate stopped. How do you actually identify which events to track, right? You mentioned about instrumentation, which is super important. But maybe with an example from your current experience or from the companies that you worked at previously, how do you pick a metric and then how do you track events that go and drive that particular KPI?
Sure. That's a great question. Thanks for the question. Now, there are two ways to do it. One way is to identify the critical events, like Nate told, that for every event you find out the retention, week 2 retention or month 1 retention, and see that which events lead to higher retention or lower retention. The ones which lead to very high retention, that are your critical events. So that are key events that you should always track. Another more objective way of seeing it is that, for example, say, for example, you are on a page where you see multi-products. Say, let's talk about a product called Big Basket. Now you see multiple products of vegetables and groceries, and you kind of explore. But what is the meaningful action, CTA there, is only when you select or add a product to your cart. Okay. Now adding a product to your cart is the event that is defining event. All the other events is just to help you understand what helps in adding a product to the cart. Okay, so here now adding a product to the cart, that CTA becomes the most critical event that you should always track. You can never ignore. And other things, what you can do is you might start off with tracking all the events, but the events which you think do not have really good correlation with, say, adding a product to the cart, you can kind of ignore them. There are a lot of background events that some people record. You can ignore them. Right. So I think it's more related to the business, what is important for you, and you can take a call. But these are some of the frameworks how you can identify.
Awesome. Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah.
Deepak, I think in the chat section, folks are asking for an example. So,
okay, yeah.
Would you be able to explain that bit with an example? It could be from your current gig. It could be from something that you've done in the past. Open to both, but something that will help people relate, like with any stage that you were at. I don't want to pick up a particular one, but you guys can hear me all right?
Yeah, which question are you talking about?
It's about the metric. I think a bunch of them have asked for an example there so that they can relate. So in case you have particular problem where, say, you were trying to solve while you were growing, maybe at Khatabook or earlier even, what was one metric that you really picked after, and how did you instrument some events around it? What are the KPIs that you track? How did you pick that?
Okay, so actually KPIs are always related to an objective that you want to solve. And say, let me take some example. So for example, I have say a Facebook news feed. Okay, let's take a very common example. Now, what is the idea behind Facebook news feed? Facebook news feed was launched around 2006, if I'm not wrong, but Facebook did not start with it. Now, the idea about Facebook news feed was to increase the engagement of people. So initially, people had to discover other people and send friend requests, and they thought that people have a habit of digging down into what other people are also doing, and they wanted to harp on this habit and show them the content that their other friends are posting. Now, the KPI for this would be the engagement, right? Does your repeat cycle on your Facebook increase, right? Does your retention increase? But ideally, the key KPI would be a frequency of use should increase because of this. And obviously, it will lead to higher retention. Now, similarly, for every product or product feature, you can define what is the main purpose of it. Based on that purpose, you create the KPIs, and to achieve or say whether the KPI is achieved or not, you track multiple things. For example, let's only take example of newsfeed, and you want to increase the engagement. Now, engagement is the end of the funnel, right? But before that, you will see to how many people newsfeed was shown, how many people engaged with the newsfeed, how many people engaged, like how much time did they spend on the newsfeed, and then how is it related to the engagement rates. So yeah, so this is one example, right? Similarly, you can create other examples.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take the next one. Deepak, I'm sorry I'm dropping your question, even though it's high worded because it's slightly contextual in nature. I am taking Sujay's question, and okay, this is a bread and butter for you, Nate. How different is Amplitude as compared to Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics?
Yeah, I love that question. So there's a couple of fundamental things that I think make it different. So one is the type of data it's designed to track. So Google and Adobe are tools that were built to track web data, web analytics, right? Especially when they were first built was sort of early 2000s, when it was really all about page views. You can think of the web experience back then, it was like maybe 4 or 5 things. You land in a website, you see something, you click on it, and then you click purchase, right? How many people's product experience is 4 steps? Right? No one's. It's like 150, 200 steps now. And so at the most basic level, some of the ways that those products were designed just aren't really designed to fit the world today. And so that's one major difference. The second part is just the type of data they can track. Yes, I think Adobe and Google Analytics are now starting able to do some event-based tracking. But again, they're using that and they're force fitting that into their sort of existing layouts and the way their analytics are working. And so what we've heard, what we experienced even ourselves, is that it's still just what you're still required in those situations to have someone who has extreme knowledge of Adobe and Google to do all the analysis for you. And the reason, like, if you believe that product-led is important and you believe that understanding behavioral data is going to be powering the future of your business, you can't have that knowledge be siloed with just a few people in your company. It has to be accessible to everyone who work on it. So that's marketing, that's product, that's design, that's engineering, that's data science. And so one of the other challenges with some of these older tools is that they are so technically advanced that if you haven't built your career off them, they're really hard to use. So that's the other side. So I think it's a question of the data they can support and also the ability for just anyone to use them is the two things that we see which really hold people back. One last thing I'll say is that the final thing that really sort of separates is just being able to see cross-platform journeys, right? So again, because those tools are designed for web, they don't do a good job of helping you understand people moving from web to mobile, which we know is how it works. Like no one is, in very few situations is someone only mobile or only web. And so you really need to understand that up and down experience. And that's another place that those two platforms will struggle.
Awesome. I think folks, if you're starting out and you're figuring out a product analytics solution, you should definitely check out Amplitude. They also have a free plan initially, which is available, and that might give you more value around what Amplitude offers.
Pat, can we get some special discount for TPF community members? I know.
Yes, we have someone in the audience called Anjali. Just DM her or maybe reach out to her on LinkedIn.
Anjali, sorry, I'm putting you on a spot on a live session. But
So,
yeah,
so
no
she's
pressure,
gonna
no
help
pressure.
you out. She's gonna help
Yeah.
you out with that. Yes.
Awesome. Parth, how much time do we have or left on the session? I know people have a hard stop in different geographies, so just want to check.
Yeah.
I see a
So
couple of interesting questions.
yeah, let's just take one last question, and I think the rest of the questions can follow on Twitter and LinkedIn separately. Yes.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think Ermi does give an option to export these questions, and we'll
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
try to come up with a blog for that. So cool. Lots of
Yes.
interesting questions. Thanks for keeping it so interactive, guys. I pick. I think it's a ping pong game. Parth is directing questions. Nate, I'm directing questions to Arpit. So this one's for you. Interesting questions. I think over the last couple of months, you've been working with users in the NBU space, right? What are some counterintuitive or very interesting points that data has revealed to you, which you never thought would have been possible, right? You went in with a bias, right? And say at 3 a.m., you're like, hey, though data is telling me something very different. I'm extrapolating the question for sure. But did you ever come across something like that? And if you can share some examples, that would be awesome.
Uh, just one clarity, in which space you talked about? Example, in which space? You said something, MTU. I did not hear that.
NBU, next billion users, I guess.
Okay, NBU. Okay. Let me just think about it. So I right now work in the SMB space, helping out small and medium businesses, right? So one of the things that we realized is, so there were a set of users, for example, who so what how Khatabook app works is that you record any udhar or any credit that you have given to any of your customers, and instead of recording it on notebook, you record it on Khatabook and kind of send reminders and to them to pay back and send payment links so that they can pay you online instead of coming to the shop back. Now, what we realized is that there are a lot of people, there were a set of people who were not really, who were recording a lot of credit transactions, but they were not sending reminders, right? And we were just thinking that, why are they not using this feature? And we got a feedback, we ran a survey and they said that, they don't find this feature useful. And we were almost about to take a call that maybe a reminder feature has some problem. Okay, so when we went deeper into this, we realized that actually the way they collect money from the users is different. First of all, we realized that these were actually distributors in India, and how distributor relationship with retailers work is that the distributor gives credit to their retailers. Retailers buy stuff on credit, say a 1 month credit, and they do not recover directly. They have like a sales agent who go and talk to the retailers, and they kind of recover money through that route. So that is why they were not using our feature, because the style of which they do business is absolutely different. And it is not really any problem with the feature itself, it's just the wrong target group for that feature. So these are some of the use cases which we never knew of, but when you go deeper into it. So what I would say is that behavior analytics does not stop at data. You have to like take it further to consumer insighting. That can happen offline through surveys or anything.
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Arpit. Parth, are we open to one last question? I think it's in the chat section. A couple of folks mentioned on the fine line between personalization and off the time, then probably we can shift it. But in case you have 2 minutes to take that up.
I think we lost your voice in between. What do you say?
I think
The fine
I'm
line
low on bandwidth.
difference. No worries. The question is probably, let me find it in the question section.
All right,
It's on the chat section.
Okay, it's on the chat. Nate, maybe you want to take this up?
Sure, I definitely want to get Arpit's opinion, but the question is, there's a fine line between personalization and over-personalization. The latter leads to echo chambers, conformity on Facebook. How do you tread the line between what's good for the product, what's good for the user? Yeah, it's a really important question, and Amplitude's actually starting to think about this stuff too, something that we think about a lot, even with our customers. I think the question here is, you need to understand what the purpose is of what you're trying to drive. Is that if you create an experience that is good in the short term but bad in the long term, your business is not going to be successful, right? Like, so even Facebook, to some extent, they're receiving a lot of backlash, and so is that really the best business decision for them to do that if that's going to create customers moving away from them in the long term? And so I think what we always talk about with Amplitude is like, your game is not is not the like next couple months. Like, go back to what the Jeff Bezos quote that I shared earlier is, your game is the next 3 to 5 years. And so think about how you're going to build that strategy where you're going to build customers who love your product, love what you're doing, love the things you're solving. And if you do anything to jeopardize that, that is going to be a huge problem. So I think it's a balance of that, of like making sure you're balancing the short-term needs with the long-term play, and the long-term play has to try to outweigh that, because that's ultimately the thing that's going to make a difference. That's I don't know, that's some of the things that we think about. Love to hear what Arpit says on that.
Yeah, so I'll just top up your answer, Nate. So where I have seen over personalization is, for example, let's take an example of YouTube. Okay, now for example, you had some playlists, you watched some videos, and recently you watched some particular singer. Now over personalization is that I keep showing you the same singer, the same songs again and again and again. And this over personalization generally happens when you take only the recent data, do not look at the larger data set, and you do not introduce freshness, right? You keep creating the same content again and again. That is where you call over personalization. In data science, we also call it overfitting, like using some specific use case with past data and then personalizing based on that. So that happens when your product has very less data about a user. So generally we say that you start personalization only when you have certain amount of data for a user, from where onwards A/B tests become successful. And a good personalization means that you take good enough data and try to understand what all other things person likes, and also introduce freshness which is related to your content but not exactly like your content. That is actually personalization. Yeah, so some apps are good at personalization, and some apps do hyper personalization depending on which stage they are, also depending on how much data they have.
Got it. Thanks, Arpit. Parth, I think I'm a little low on bandwidth. In case, let me know if you can.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I'll close. Okay. So thanks, Arpit. Thanks, Nate. This was an amazing conversation. I think there are a lot of takeaways from this. What's the best way to sort of reach you out? Maybe on Twitter, LinkedIn. What do you guys suggest if the audience wants to sort of reach you out and ask more or know more about your prospective careers and work? Nate and Arpit, if you can answer
Sure,
that for
yeah,
our audience.
LinkedIn's the best for me.
Yeah,
okay, awesome.
I'm not on Twitter, so LinkedIn is the only option.
Awesome. So LinkedIn is the place to sort of reach out to these folks. So any last words, Nate? Any last words, Arpit? This was a fun conversation. Just anything for the audience?
Yeah, no, this was this was time well spent. Really great to hear the insights from everyone, even the folks sharing in the chat too. I think the big thing to remember that I repeat ad nauseum is, like, remember what you're trying to solve. Like, always don't just do things because you want to get more and more of it. Like, what is the goal? What is the KPI you're trying to move? What part of your product you're trying to focus on? Always have that outcome in mind, or it's just too easy to get lost.
Awesome. That sounds great. Arpit, anything at your end?
No, I just feel that you both did a great job. Nate had a great presentation, and the audience were very, very interactive. It's a long session, more than 1 hour, and they have been asking questions and chatting all along. So thank you very much for this energy.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, folks, and Nate, good luck on getting vaccinated today. Congratulations on that front as well. Thank you so much to the two speakers joining us today, and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you. Anyone who wants to stay back, we have a few announcements in the audience. If you want to stay back, you can. We'll do the rest of the part later. Sure.
Super.
Thanks, Arpit. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, bye-bye.
See you. Awesome. Parth, let me know in case my voice is breaking. You can take over. But awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. I think we did share. It was pretty. Like, we've been hosting a bunch of sessions for folks who joined us earlier. Thanks for being so interactive. I think lots and lots of interesting questions. I think the deck went on for a bit, so we couldn't take all the questions. But I think we're collaborating with the Amplitude team so that we'll try covering as many questions that you guys have all shared on a blog, and we'll reshare that. So do check that out. Apart from that, I think we have 4 events lined up for you. trying to cover all aspects of product. Bunch of sessions that we've done in analytics. This is a primer into personalization that we wanted to do, and a level up on analytics. So this was part two. We have a tech 101 coming. I think lots of folks have asked us, hey, I'm a product manager, want to get into product, where do I start tech? So Akash, who's the ex-CTO of and the CPO of Gojek, is joining us for this session. He's had 10 years of experience as a dev before moving into product. So some really good examples. And if you guys are active on Twitter, I'm sure you're already following so many product managers from Gojek. So do join in that session. Folks from ChargeBee, folks from I think Miro one's not live yet. It's exclusive for you guys, but we're getting some more workshops lined up for you. Thanks to Parth and giving him a shout out here, because he's been hustling out a lot on the back end.
Yeah.
For folks early in their career looking to grow in their PM career, we have a session lined up for you all as well. So that should give you some more insights. Lots of questions today on, hey, I wanted to break in, I wanted to grow, I'm in a mid-career, I want to transition to product leader. So we have that session lined up. Do let us know in the chat section if there are any specific things that you guys are looking for. Even we are looking to get relevant. We're just trying to bridge industry to opportunities. We know there's a gap there, and we're trying to solve this as a community. In case you guys have some ideas, in case you want to join us in doing this, always looking to get very interesting folks on board. One thing that we always hear is best part about TPF is the team, and that's something that I honestly believe in. You'll make friends while trying to break in or grow in your career. So do join the team. One new series that I'm more excited about is the Teardown series, as well as the founder story that has started at TPF. So that is a personal initiative at TPF, but obviously supported by a bunch of volunteers. I know I'm taking a biased take here, but that's just to let you know that there is a bunch of initiatives going on, each of us taking care of bits of it. And it's not only the two of us. I think lots of people behind the scenes working on it. So do check it out. I think Y Combinator founders, we have 3 of them lining up for the end of this month. I know lots and lots of initiatives lined up. Do check that out in case you guys are startup founder looking to break into the YC series, or if you really want to break into startups. I think these guys have raised a bit of money, so might be looking for interesting folks to join them. So that is one series. And Teardown, we've done it for the last 6 months. We're finalist. I mean, so that's a parallel to the B School competitions that we had. Winners get a chance to interview with companies. We worked with Dunzo, we worked with Oyo, we worked with Grofers, top startups in India. So do check that out if you're looking to break in. That's a great opportunity. It's hands-on. It is very close to what you might be doing in your PM career as well. So do check that out. With that part, handing it over to you.
Yeah, if you just to answer it out in a different direction, this is a purely volunteer-based community. That means most of us are doing a separate day job and doing this at night. If you feel that we add any value to you tonight, or in any of the geography you are in right now, if we were able to give you any sort of takeaway, just give us a shout out on Twitter or LinkedIn. We are at the Product Folks. Yeah, that's all for tonight, and for those who are morning for today. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great weekend ahead, and we hope to see you in the next 4 events as well. All the details in the chat section. Thanks a lot. Bye. Good night.